That is why when we see the great biblical story of Daniel in the lion's den, it is miraculous, and by all means, it does not make sense. Because when you get thrown into a den of hungry lions, what happens? You get eaten. Well, hey there, my name is Ian and welcome back to Church Door. We're so glad you're taking a little time to be with us here again today. Would you do me a quick favor and give this video a thumbs up? That makes the algorithm shoot it out to other people just like you so that they can go further in their journey with Jesus. And remember, we are here every single Sunday live at 11:30 Central Standard Time to walk with you, to pray with you. If you're going through something, go ahead and reach out to us. We're in the chat, or you can text prayer to the number that you see coming up on the screen right now. Crocodiles are easy. They try to kill and eat you. People are harder. Sometimes they pretend to be your friend first. This intriguing quote comes from none other than the most famous crocodile wrangler there is, Steve Irwin. Growing up in the 1990s led to some of the most interesting television ever. Not only were we obsessed with reality TV, but dangerous reality TV. Hence the shows like Survivor and Fear Factor, and of course, one for kids, The Crocodile Hunter. I can remember watching with amazement thinking, these guys are absolutely out of their mind. Seriously, because it seemed like every dangerous creature you could think of, Steve was picking that up week after week and cuddling it like it was a teddy bear. Anybody with half a brain in their head towards danger would probably thought what I did, which was you play with the bull, you get the horns. We all knew it was just going to be a matter of time before Steve was seriously injured or, heaven forbid, even killed. We all kind of grew up and moved on with our lives, and Steve continued cuddling crocodiles. And with each passing week, his presence just went further and further into the recess of our mind. Then what seemed like out of the blue, I was a sophomore in college, and the inevitable actually happened. In September of 2006, on a trip to the Great Barrier Reef where he was shooting a documentary, Steve Irwin was tragically killed by injuries sustained from a stingray. It was sad. We all loved Steve. We loved his over-the-top spirit, his excitement for dangerous wildlife, and when we got the news, the simple math actually just seemed to add up. We knew that playing with deadly animals, the odds were against him. That is why when we see the great biblical story of Daniel in the lion's den, it is miraculous, and by all means, it does not make sense. Because when you get thrown into a den of hungry lions, what happens? You get eaten. By all means, the king and his guards should have cracked open that den the next morning and saw a bunch of lions chilling on the floor, full of Daniel meat, picking their teeth with his bones like a toothpick. But that's not what they found. What they saw was a miracle, something that should have not happened. Yet it did, because God's great glory and provision was being made true through Daniel still being alive. So when we live our life day to day, we, like Daniel, also face lions' dens. And the outlook by the standard of this world, it's not good, it's bleak. Each day we face the lion's den of sin, and sin seeks to devour us. The scripture tells us in 1 Peter 5:8, your adversary, the devil, prowls like a roaring lion seeking who he will devour. That's why this morning I want to share with you Daniel's 3 C's to overcoming the lion's den in your life. As we wrap up our series in the book of Daniel, we are in the most famous and most used story in the life of Daniel. Yet because we have taken some time to read Daniel's story up to this moment, and if you're watching online, feel free, go back and watch the other 5 messages that lead up to this one. There are so many more layers of richness we have discovered that overlay this story. It helps us to understand the deeper meanings than just a man being put into an impossible situation to overcome. We must remember that this was not Daniel's first rodeo. Matter of fact, his whole life was a rodeo in a foreign land, a land in which he lived since childhood, and at every turn, obstacles continued to jump into his path. Obstacles where it would have been easy for him to compromise and just to become more like his Babylonian counterparts. Yet time and time again, Daniel never compromised his faithfulness to Yahweh, while at the same time, he was gaining trust and credibility in the culture which God had put him. This, mind you, is also how God works on us, from the inside out. He invades our hearts, and over time, He transforms us in every single fashion. So the story of Daniel's life is layered with how God works in and through us. No matter how broken or hard the situation might be, no matter how big the odds are against us, in the end, we can trust that God will always get the W. In chapter 6, yet again, there's an obstacle that comes into play for Daniel. After the sudden death of Belshazzar, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, Darius the Mede takes control of the kingdom. And he enacts a strategy of diversified governance, which Daniel is one of 3 satraps or presidents the princes of the land are given account to. The scripture even says in 6:3 that Daniel was preferred above all the presidents and princes because of his excellent spirit in him. And the king was set to put him over the whole realm of the kingdom. And this brings us to our first C of Daniel's to overcoming the lion's den. Character. Leadership blogger Carey Nieuwhof said it like this: your competency will take you only as far as your character will sustain you. This means it doesn't matter what you can do for the Lord. It will all fall short if your character hasn't first been formed by Him. We see this a lot these days in the church. Pastors who can really preach from a pulpit or lead well, yet the content of their character inevitably catches up to them, and then whole congregations of faithful Christ followers are then suddenly scattered and left in shambles. Yet for Daniel, it was his character that preceded him. Because of his intimacy with God, the one true God, he was formed for whatever might face him. This means that even when we face unfortunate circumstances, He shines within us like a beacon of light. So my question to you is, how is your character being formed? You've probably heard you are what you eat, which is by all means true. And if you eat milk and cookies all the time, you will look like who? Santa Claus. So it's the same spiritually. If your heart and mind is consumed with nothing but social media and television, your character is going to look a lot like the ideas which you consume. If we spend little to no time sitting at the feet of Jesus and worshiping Him, hearing from Him, cherishing His words, it will be extremely hard for the output of our life to reflect His character. For Daniel, this was no area of compromise. It was known of Daniel that this was an area he didn't leave up to chance. Day after day, month after month, Daniel was faithful in his commitment to God. So here's Daniel in this story full of God's character, finding himself serving as one of the highest officials on this earthly kingdom. But of course, some didn't like that, especially the other presidents and princes. So here's what happened. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could not find an occasion nor fault. Forasmuch as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then those men said, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except find it against him concerning the law of his God. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said unto him, King Darius, live forever. All the king's presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes and the counselors and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and to sign the writing that it may not be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which alter not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. Now when Daniel knew that the writing had been signed, he went into his house, and his windows being opened in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before God, as he did aforetime. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Here we see Daniel's counterparts weaponizing against him the second C of Daniel, his consistency. These men were seeking to bring Daniel down. They knew they were going to not be able to get him because of his character. So they set up a scenario where Daniel's consistent faithfulness to God would get him in trouble. So they tricked Darius into signing a law that would have anyone who worships any other god or man besides Darius to be thrown into the lion's den, knowing good and well that Daniel would be found consistently, without fail, worshiping his one true God. And sure enough, that's what happened. Daniel continued to pray 3 times a day, as he always did, with the window open towards Jerusalem, and there were his enemies ready to rat him out to Darius. What if we were put into Daniel's situation? Would our enemies know where to find us consistently at the Lord's feet? How about you, moms and dads? Would your kids know where to point within your day where you've consistently met with the Lord? Do they even know you have a relationship with the Lord? Or to that single 20-something or empty nester, would your friends know when and what the rhythms are in your life that show consistency to being at the feet of Jesus? Actually, pre-COVID, the average American church attender attended 1.8 times a month. I imagine now, post-COVID, that's even worse. So how can we expect to face the trials of life if we're not even consistently chasing after the one who's going to bring us through our hard times? For many watching this today, Jesus is only on speed dial for you. When the going gets tough, you cry out for him, yet when things aren't that bad, you got better things to do. I can imagine for Daniel, it had to be hard, being the odd man out, consistently, every single day, 3 times a day, praying to God when everybody else just went about their own business. And I'm sure it was probably inconvenient, at times monotonous, boring, or maybe even felt like he was just going through the motions at times. But this is what Daniel knew. It was his consistency that gave him the courage that whatever he might face, he could overcome. It is ultimately in inconsistency that leads us to compromise and collapse when we're faced with our lion's dens. With inconsistency, you have nothing to fall back on, especially when things get squirrely. On the other hand, consistency gives us the courage needed when the pressure is on. My favorite example of this is the Miyagi principle, with everyone's favorite other Daniel, the Karate Kid. Mr. Miyagi teaches Daniel to
wax on, wax off.
And even when Daniel didn't get it, he was just told to be consistent. Wax on, wax off. Of course, that Daniel realizes it is in the heat of a fight that his consistency paid off. And so that was for our Daniel here in verse 16. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spoke and said to Daniel, "Your God whom you serve continually, he will deliver you." And a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, and the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went on to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were the instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. Then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste into the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spoke and said to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom you serve continual able to deliver you from the lions?" Then said Daniel to the king, "O king, live forever." Here in this moment of highest tension, when there was nothing that Daniel could do, he was thrown into a lion's den full of hungry lions. And anyone looking at that situation says, it's over. Daniel's done. He's dead. Yet for Daniel, he took courage that in that den, knowing the fact that God was faithful through his consistency, no matter what the outcome. Yet for Daniel, he took courage into that lion's den. He knew that the fact was God would be with him. He was always faithful, no matter what he would face. But here's the big exclamation mark to our study in the book of Daniel. It wasn't merely because of Daniel's godly character, which was formed through his consistency in worship. It wasn't any of those things that made this moment so miraculous. The exclamation of this story is this: there's nothing that Daniel could do to save himself. It was only God that could miraculously save him from that den. Therefore, Daniel gets no glory, and God alone gets the glory. Listen, friends, it's the same for us when we face the lion's den of life that seek to devour us. Only God can save you from them. And how does God do this for us? Well, He sent a greater Daniel, and his name was Jesus. And when we submit our lives to His character, to His consistency to the Father, then we have a chance to actually make it out of the lion's den alive. The Bible tells us that Jesus humbled Himself, taking on our form and ultimately our place in the lion's den. But like Darius and his guards found, the grave could not defeat Jesus. He rose again on our behalf, demonstrating that God's power was always over the grave, and therefore He deserves all the glory. This is the season we are entering, the hope of the resurrection. God's power demonstrated over sin, death, and the grave. So as we slowly continue to march forward to the Easter season, might you consider how Jesus has come for you to help you overcome the lions in your life. If you've never given your life to Jesus Christ and you'd like to do that for the very first time today, we have a team of people here that want to walk you through that. Just reach out to us in the chat box, or you can text prayer to the number that you see coming up on the screen right now. If you're new to Church Door, we want to encourage you to go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that every single time we put out a piece of content, it's going to come directly to you. You can also go the extra mile by helping us out, going to rivervalleyrockford.org/give and making a donation there. That donation is going to go right back out to helping other people just like you take their next step with Jesus. Our prayer for you is that no matter what you might face this week, that you will ultimately find that the lion's den is not conquered by your power, but the power of God in your life alone. May His miracles be the thing that guide your steps this week. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Have an awesome week.